Thank you, Don, for that starting us off. Now we're going to have three other officials going to speak to us. In a way, we come down to more specifics beyond the 30,000 feet, look at the Indo-Pacific, which is important. But now we'll have three officials from Washington speaking to us on different aspects of the Indo-Pacific. Because it's one thing for all of us that are engaged in this discourse on the Indo-Pacific in a very, very macro sense. But I think it's great for all of us in the region to hear from officials in the system, US system, who are dealing with different aspects of the Indo-Pacific. So the operational dimension, I think that will be very, very valuable for us before we take off into our own discourse on what the Indo-Pacific is, where it is going, how we need to address that. So the three panelists today, all three US officials. The first one is Afreen Akhtar. Afreen Akhtar serves as the senior advisor to the Assistant Secretary of State for South and Central Asian Affairs, that's Don Lu. In this role, she oversees the Bureau's Office on Security and Transnational Affairs. So not just dealing with one country, but looking at the region as a whole. Previously, Ms. Akhtar served as the National Security and Foreign Affairs Advisor to U.S. Senator Chris Van Hollen. Ms. Akhtar's prior assignments include the State Department's Office of Pakistan Affairs, Political Military Affairs Bureau, the U.S. Embassy in Beijing, and the National Security Council. She was a Presidential Management Fellow and a Fulbright Scholar. She earned her master's degree in public policy from the Harvard Kennedy School of Government and a bachelor's from Brown University. After that, we'll have Mr. Christopher Steele. Steele is a career member of the U.S. Foreign Service. He's the senior coordinator for the Indo-Pacific in the U.S. Agency for International Development, USAID. He has previously held leadership positions at the U.S. embassies in Pakistan, Guatemala, Afghanistan, Kenya, and served on the National Security Council staff at the White House. Prior to joining the USAID, Mr. Steele managed various development programs in democracy, environment, health, education throughout Latin America and the United States. He's from New Jersey. Steele holds a doctorate from the University of Pennsylvania, a master's degree from Harvard University, and a bachelor's degree from the University of Scranton. And the third speaker we have is Rear Admiral Pete Gumatau. He's a native of Guam. He's currently serving as the director of the Daniel K. Inouye Asia Pacific Center for Security Studies. I'm sure many of you who have dealt with the Pacific Command in the past or the Indo-Pacific Command now would have an opportunity to visit this center, which is really a major institution today. It was set up in the mid-1990s. I had a chance to visit them at the time when they had just started. But it's really a place for meeting of officials, scholars from across the Indo-Pacific in Hawaii. So this is a thriving center where it brings together people from across the Indo-Pacific and to engage with the U.S. military and naval establishment. He's a graduate of the U.S. Naval Academy, has a Master of Arts in National Security Studies from the Naval War College. Admiral Gumatau has an extensive experience in operating globally during the 37 years of active duty service, including 8 years as the U.S. Navy flag officer. He served on a number of important ships. He's also held command positions in the U.S. Navy as commander of the U.S. Naval Forces in Korea, commander of the Carrier Strike Group CSG-11, that is the Nimitz Strike Group, commander of the Naval Surface Force Atlantic. His decorations include Defense Distinguished Service Medal, Defense Superior Service Medal, Legion of Merit, Meritorious Service Medal, and other personal unit and campaign awards. It's very important to hear the perspective of the Navy. I mean, long before we had a regional order, I think one way of thinking about the regional order, at least in this whole Indian and the Pacific Oceans, was really the large presence of the U.S. Navy. So taking the responsibility for securing sea lines of communication and present across the region. How long the U.S. will sustain that, that's going to be, and in what form, what kind of partnerships it will develop in the coming years. All those, of course, we're going to talk about it. But I think Admiral brings a very, very important perspective for us to think about the future of the Indo-Pacific. I'll stop here. We'll start with Afreen Akhtar.
Thank you, Mr. Rajamohan. I'd like to thank Ambassador Julie Chung, Major General Melinda Perez, and you for convening this event today on the Indo-Pacific. It's truly an honor to speak with you today. As President Biden has made clear, expanding engagement in the Indo-Pacific is a critical U.S. priority. No region will be more vital to the United States in our future. Our security and prosperity are fundamentally tied to the Indo-Pacific. And that's a sentiment that crosses party lines here in the United States. Democrats and Republicans alike are committed to building our relationships in this key region. We're committed to ensuring this region remains free and open and becomes more connected, prosperous, secure, and resilient. And that's a commitment that the United States is prepared to keep for decades to come. Assistant Secretary Liu and Ambassador Chung have already spoken eloquently about how the Biden administration's Indo-Pacific strategy advances our shared goals for this region. So I'd like to focus in more specifically on how the Indo-Pacific strategy aims to increase economic prosperity for everyday Americans in the United States, for Sri Lankans, and for our other partners in the Indo-Pacific region. As President Biden announced last year, the United States is developing an Indo-Pacific economic framework with allies and partners to deepen economic partnerships in the region and coordinate our approach to global economic challenges. Through the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework, we aim to develop new approaches to trade that meet high labor and environmental standards and will govern our digital economies and cross-border data flows. We'll work with our partners to advance resilient and secure supply chains that are diverse, open, and predictable while removing barriers and improving transparency and information sharing. We'll promote private sector investment to this region, encourage innovation, strengthen economic competitiveness, create good-paying jobs, rebuild supply chains, and expand economic opportunities for middle-class families, as 1.5 billion people in the Indo-Pacific will join the global middle class in this upcoming decade. Building high-quality infrastructure is key to economic growth and also a main focus of the Biden administration. The Infrastructure Transaction and Assistant Network is an example of our infrastructure work in this region. This network brings together 14 U.S. government agencies that have collaborated to support dozens of quality infrastructure projects with a market value of more than $190 billion in the Indo-Pacific, further strengthening partners' governance and project management capacity. Through President Biden's Build Back Better World initiative, we're also mobilizing private capital to invest in the Indo-Pacific in order to close the infrastructure gap and support regional infrastructure that is values-driven, transparent, and adherent to strong standards. To build prosperity in this region, we need to make sure our economies recover fully from the COVID-19 pandemic. That's why the United States, in partnership with COVAX, has donated to Sri Lanka 3.4 million vaccines and provided over 18 million in health equipment and other relief to address the COVID-19 pandemic in this past year. We will continue to work closely with our partners in the region and beyond to strengthen their public health systems to withstand future shocks, drive investments in global health security, and expand regional platforms to prevent, deter, and respond to emergencies, including biological threats. We'll also work with the WHO, the World Health Organization, the G7, the G20, and other multilateral fora to strengthen preparedness and response. Together, these initiatives will help end the COVID-19 pandemic and prepare us for future crises, enabling our economies to recover and grow. Climate change is one of the biggest security and economic threats facing all of our nations, and it is inextricably linked to the welfare of this region and a key driver of economic prosperity. That's why the Biden administration is working hard to address the climate crisis in this decisive decade and limit the most serious impacts of climate change. We're approaching this issue on multiple fronts. Clean energy technologies represent multi-trillion-dollar global market opportunities through 2030. U.S. leadership on developing, deploying, and driving down the costs of these technologies will help our foreign partners commit to increasingly more ambitious and achievable targets. For example, we're supporting Sri Lanka's ambitious climate and clean energy goals to achieve 70% renewable energy by 2030 and reaching net zero carbon emissions by 2050. Not only are we helping the government of Sri Lanka make its power sector more secure, reliable, and sustainable, we're cooperating with Sri Lanka to introduce floating solar energy generation. Across 10 US agencies, our efforts in the Indo-Pacific have allocated more than 200 million for technical assistance programming in Indo-Pacific markets to meet climate and clean energy goals, improve those markets' regulatory environments and procurement processes, develop national and regional energy markets, empower women in the energy sector, deploy private capital, and modernize energy infrastructure. At the Leaders Summit on Climate in April of 2021, President Biden launched the Global Partnership for Climate Smart Infrastructure, an initiative with US industry and government partners that will deliver clean energy and transportation solutions to emerging markets around the world. The US International Development Finance Corporation, or DFC, plays a crucial role in catalyzing private sector-led investment in developing economies. DFC has increased its portfolio to 265 million in loans designed to support Sri Lanka's small and medium-sized enterprises, particularly women-owned businesses. And we are exploring additional initiatives for sustainable manufacturing, businesses, fair trade food producers, and health services. So as you can see, the Biden administration is pursuing many different initiatives to advance prosperity in the Indo-Pacific region. We're building infrastructure, tackling the climate crisis head on, and responding to the COVID-19 pandemic, and building resilient supply chains. We're making large investments across the board, and together with our partners, we're answering the call to do more. With that, I'll turn to my other colleagues on this panel, and I look forward to your questions. Thank you.
Mr. Steele, yeah.
Good morning, and thank you for the warm welcome and introduction, Raja. And thank you, Assistant Secretary Liu and Ambassador Chung, for highlighting much of the thinking that went into developing the Indo-Pacific strategy. On behalf of the United States Agency for International Development, it's my pleasure to share my perspectives from Washington on the development objectives of the 2022 IPS and how the collective pursuit of development goals can strengthen diplomacy, security, and prosperity across the Indo-Pacific region. After the 2017 launch of the Indo-Pacific strategy, USAID got to work advancing the goal of a free and open Indo-Pacific region. We adopted the USAID Indo-Pacific framework to build upon our successful development efforts across the region. This framework informed all of the country-level strategies that we developed with our partners in the region. In line with the broader US government vision for a free and open Indo-Pacific, USAID worked on strengthening democratic institutions, boosting inclusive economic growth, and improving natural resource management. At the same time, we continued to prioritize health and education, which are the foundation for sustainable progress across all other sectors. Our framework has allowed us to contribute unique strengths as leading development practitioners with vast networks of grassroots, on-the-ground partnerships. And to date, we've made some incredible progress. In Sri Lanka, USAID has helped increase Parliament's transparency, giving Sri Lankans more information on their legislature's work. To do this, USAID refurbished the Parliamentary Media Center, introduced the live broadcast of parliamentary proceedings, and opened committee meetings to the public, contributing to a more timely, accurate, and efficient news reporting system that supports more informed citizens of Sri Lanka. Also in South Asia, USAID launched a regional digital program, the South Asia Regional Digital Initiative, that increased open and secure connectivity and improved access to the internet to reduce the digital divide. Moreover, this program increased users' awareness about digital safety and helped more citizens participate in the booming digital economy, especially benefiting small and women-led businesses. As a result of USAID's long engagement with power trading across South Asia, just over 20 million megawatt hours of power was traded between 2019 and 2020. Now, this is enough energy to power 28 million homes for a year. We've since launched the South Asia Regional Energy Partnership to continue to promote clean and renewable energy and combat climate change across the region. These successes were possible in part because the Indo-Pacific strategy promotes resilience building as a key aspect of all US government efforts in this diverse and dynamic region. But the shocks of COVID-19 were swift and unanticipated. When the pandemic hit, COVID-19 response became our top priority. USAID pivoted our assistance to meet the crisis head on because COVID-19 needs were urgent and lives were at stake. We revised our country level objectives based on urgent country needs, and this pivot was, and continues to be, absolutely critical for saving lives and restarting economic growth. When a second COVID-19 wave overtook South Asia in the spring of last year, the US government mobilized to provide medical supplies to our partners in Bangladesh, India, Nepal, Maldives, Pakistan, and Sri Lanka. In India alone, the US government rapidly deployed 6 plane loads of life-saving supplies to New Delhi in 6 days. Across South Asia, USAID delivered medications, equipment, and more to save lives and support hospitals. Today, we continue to address the secondary economic impacts of COVID-19. In Sri Lanka, the USAID supported enterprises hit hardest by the pandemic to repurpose and retool their business operations for the new normal. In partnership with the government of Sri Lanka, we provided specialized mentoring to small and medium enterprises, including women-led businesses, so that they could adapt while strengthening their competitiveness. And across South Asia overall, the US government has provided over 129 million COVID-19 vaccines, including 3.4 million doses for Sri Lanka. These vaccines complement $386 million of COVID-19 support for South Asia to expand vaccine access, address the global oxygen crisis, and provide rapid response support to virus hotspots. But the fact remains that COVID-19 has underlined, and in some cases exacerbated, the governance, economic security, and environmental issues facing countries across the Indo-Pacific. So, in the face of these pressing challenges, the 2022 Indo-Pacific strategy is an opportunity for USAID to re-examine our ambitious development goals. It is a guide for us to redefine our critical work, prioritize our efforts and partnerships, and extend our leadership role to advance US and regional security and prosperity. As we speak, USAID is reimagining and building upon our framework to better harmonize with and reflect the 2022 IPS and refine our approach to tackling issues important to the entire region. We are consulting with our field personnel and on-the-ground partners about this reimagined framework. This is allowing us to take into account new realities facing our partner countries, including the damages of COVID-19 and its evolving challenges, as well as our country's hopes and aspirations. Through this process, where our work aligns with the 2022 IPS, our efforts are becoming very clear. Moving forward, we want to strengthen global health security while elevating climate action to the forefront of everything that we do, advancing a secure, resilient, and prosperous region. We will renew our commitment to social inclusion, human rights, and gender equity and equality so that everyone experiences the benefits of development progress, contributing to prosperity and increasing freedom for everyone in the region. We will adapt and refine our work on critical emerging technology, digital connectivity and integration, and infrastructure so that more people can access the resources they need to thrive in line with a more connected, open, and secure Indo-Pacific. And we will maintain our laser-sharp focus on countering the effects of democratic backsliding to uphold democratic ideals and institutions, furthering the region's openness while advancing good governance. Finally, a central point on our approach will be additional bilateral, regional, and multilateral partnerships. Since 2020, we've expanded our presence in the region, including in the Pacific Island countries. We've deepened our development collaboration with like-minded partners, including New Zealand and Taiwan, Australia, South Korea, and Japan. We intend to work even more closely with partners in South Asia, both bilaterally and through coordination with the Quad. We are also leveraging the resources and expertise of US private sector players in the region to spur even greater development impacts. In closing, under the 2022 IPS, USA looks forward to continuing to improve lives and brighten futures across this vibrant region and within the countless communities that call it home. A free and open, connected, prosperous, secure, and resilient Indo-Pacific. Bohoma Institute, and I look forward to our conversation later in the program.
Thank you, Mr. Steele. Yeah. Thank you for those remarks. And now I call on Admiral Gomatauta to speak to us.
Thank you, Raja, and aloha from Honolulu, Hawaii. First and foremost, I really do want to thank the host, KDU, and the U.S. Embassy at Colombo for asking me to participate in this opening salvo of an incredible program that you have in this conference on a shared vision for Indo-Pacific. I do want to recognize General Sir John Kotawala and U.S. Ambassador Julie Chung, as well as Assistant Secretary Don Liu and Major General Melinda Perez, as well as all the distinguished guests that are here at Colombo. I want to tell you that I was there in 2019 before COVID hit in Colombo. It's a beautiful country. And I say that because I didn't stay in just Colombo. After the Maritime Symposium that I was participating in, my wife and I went and visited Kandy, Siriguia, and Dambulla, I think if I get that right. They were beautiful. So it's awesome. And I really look forward to traveling back out there again. So on behalf of the Assistant Secretary of Defense for Indo-Pacific Security Affairs, Dr. Eli Ratner, and the rest of the Office of Secretary of Defense team, I'm really, really honored that I've been asked to comment on the third D. So my two colleagues picked it up on the 3Ds, and I guess I'm the cleanup batter when it comes to diplomacy, development, and now defense. On the Indo-Pacific strategy, what I would say, I would break this down into three main thoughts in the Indo-Pacific strategy from a defense perspective. The first question is what has not changed in the Indo-Pacific strategy? I know many in the region have been asking, hey, when's the strategy going to come on? So it's coming out, just like the National Defense Strategy just got recently released this month. So what has not changed? The next part I would think to just comment on really briefly is what continues to grow and evolve. And finally, which is very important, is what is at stake. So back to the first point, what has not changed? And I think this is a key takeaway for all the participants, is the message of continuity from the United States, in the sense that the US interests and intentions in the Indo-Pacific region has been consistent for many decades, despite the administration changes. The US's approach, and you heard Ambassador Chung, you've heard Assistant Secretary Liu, as well as Afreen and Chris talk about it. That has been a consistent message. Also, from the defense side, a big stress on the importance of the centrality of working with allies and partners. And when you say working with allies and partners, We're talking about what's not just working, but what's not working. And if you look at the development and implementation through collaboration and cooperation initiatives, it needs to be a consultative process, which is why I'm really excited that you have hosted this in Sri Lanka, this discussion on the Indo-Pacific strategy, because the views and the concerns from countries like Sri Lanka are important. The other piece that what has not changed, the Indo-Pacific strategy really highlights the security umbrella that has been consistently there for the past 3/4 of a century, that has been looking to preserve the essential stability of the region for economic growth and prosperity. And so that's tied to the overall priority of the Indo-Pacific strategy. As you listen to Afreen and Chris, his initiatives that they were mentioning from both the diplomacy side and the development side, that is all to preserve the essentially the liberal rules-based international order, and all of that we have really recognized has been important in a very stable and prosperous region for many decades. And in fact, if you think about it from a big sense in terms of consistency of message, the United States has shown the importance of the region. You've heard of terms from the defense side, even when I was in the Navy, the rebalance of the Pacific, the pivot to the Pacific. And that went through different administrations and how they coined it. But it is really clear in the United States perspective that the Indo-Pacific is recognized as a region of consequence. So really it's incumbent on this framework of nations. You know, we talk about working with allies and partners. Why is that so important? This framework of nations who have prospered under this current rules-based system to preserve the current order and continue to prosper. And that's why I believe, in terms of what has not changed, the U.S. truly values our partners and our allies in the region as an integral part of this Indo-Pacific strategy, because no one country, including the United States, can do this alone to ensure the security, stability, and prosperity in the region. I'll shift real quickly as to what I think continues to evolve and grow from my perspective on the defense hat. I think Ambassador Chung really eloquently started it, and then Assistant Secretary Liu started to add more to it on the 5 objectives that was really tied in the Indo-Pacific strategy that's in concert with working with allies and partners. But when I don't want to repeat what they say, but I kind of want to give some key terms from the defense side that stand out when it comes to free and open, key terms, key enablers. And I think either Raja said it about values or principles: sovereignty, rule of law, societies that are free of coercion, open lines of communication. Those are trigger principles and values that we all embrace. We all embrace, not just the US. When I think of trigger terms in building connections within and beyond the region, from the defense side, we have a commitment to our 5 mutual defense treaty allies in the region, as well as critical regional partners, especially in South Asia. And then we start to see beyond the region, NATO, EU coming into the picture. When I think of prosperity, think about economic integration. We talk about what's the investment, foreign direct investment. My gosh, when Chris was talking, it just reminded me of the tip of the iceberg of all the other direct investments the U.S. has given to the Indo-Pacific. And then this is very important: resilience and secure global telecommunications when we talk about prosperity. As you look at the 21st century and how we do business, those are very important. And then in looking at the 4th objective about building regional resilience to transnational threats, I mean, I heard Afreen talk about it as well, the climate crisis, looking at natural resources actually that will become more competitive in nature as the demand signal goes up. And how do we work with regional institutions along with countries, I think is an area that we need to evolve and grow. And last but not least, which actually hones into the D side, the defense side, is the bolstering the Indo-Pacific security. The key term, if you want to take away things on this, is integrated deterrence, right? I mean, you've heard it said by Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin, even last summer. I will talk a little bit about integrated deterrence here in a second, but let me just say that integrated deterrence is not just about U.S. cooperating within its own domains and its own mechanisms of national power. We're talking about a collective approach to integrated deterrence. And then, so let me shift to that, because truly, when it comes to defense and the Indo-Pacific strategy, integrated deterrence is the cornerstone to the Indo-Pacific strategy from the defense side. Using taking the concept that Secretary Austin talked about, he was referring to integrated deterrence as using all the capabilities in warfighting domains, sea, land, air, cyber, space. But also he expanded that integrated defense from the U.S. perspective, going, we must leverage every instrument of national power that we have, that we utilize across the whole of government, whole of society. That's why this 3D panel was very critical to you. It's not just about defense, it's not just about development, it's not just about diplomacy, it's that and then some, right? The economic side, the judicial side, and many others that need to come into play, because the capacity and capability of the combination of not just the US, but like-minded nations together to resolve issues is very powerful, and you can move the needle on that. And finally, what is at stake? Let me go back to that prediction about the region of consequence. It's a region of consequence, not because people like Indo-Pacific, it's a region of consequence because of all the trends that we're seeing, both from the population, from both the amount of GDP growth that is happening in this region. It is the region of consequences. But at the same time, when we are looking at opportunities, we're seeing challenges. We can really mess this up. It's a region of consequences, but it could be the negative view. And I will offer you, there are authoritarian regimes. There are countries that I think, if you look at the free and open Indo-Pacific principles, look at it from almost a corollary side of it. It's the antithesis of the values that we seek in terms of a free and open Indo-Pacific. And there are countries like China. I'll say it right now, there's a big elephant in the room. It's combining its economic, diplomatic, military, and technological might as it pursues a sphere of influence in the Indo-Pacific. That coercion and aggression from the defense side is most acute in the Pacific. Does it happen in other places? Absolutely. You know, our regional center is partnering with the George C. Marshall Center to kind of compare notes as to, for example, what China is doing in Europe. But from the Indo-Pacific side, for example, the economic coercion in Australia, the conflict along the line of control with India, the pressure on cross-strait tensions and rhetoric on Taiwan, and the bullying of other neighbors in the East and South China Sea, like in the Senkakus. Those things are really pressurizing the environment. And it doesn't stop there. The undermining of human rights and international law, as we have seen in Xinjiang, as well as in Hong Kong. Undermining, I believe, the very principles that have brought stability and prosperity to the Indo-Pacific. So to close out, really what's at stake is trying to counter this persistent, sometimes overt, and oftentimes discrete actions through these gray zone initiatives that assault on the values and principles of a free and open Indo-Pacific. And really, my message to everyone in this conference is really the choice is ours. You know, as a director of DKIPCSS, when I go out in the region, this is pre-COVID, right? They go, hey, Admiral or Director, don't let us choose. You know, I hear that comment all the time. Hey, look, competition is good. But when you start to turn the apple cart upside down and you're changing the rules and you're not transparent, this choice is not just a US choice. This choice needs to be a transparent discussion of what's at stake. And I think collectively, we all know what got us here to be secure and prosperous. And I think we should all work collectively as a group, like-minded countries, to ensure the preservation of the existing framework that has provided all of us these many decades, peace, prosperity, and opportunities for development. So thank you. I really look forward to the questions you may have for us. Thank you very much. Back to you, Raja.
Thank you, Admiral. We got this three officials speaking to us. We got them captive for another 25 minutes. So all of you feel free to ask any questions. Please prepare for them. But as you prepare those questions, maybe I'm going to ask them each an opening round of questions, and then we can, by the time, hopefully, all of you will join. One question to all the panelists, which is, everyone sees what's happening in Ukraine, around the world. And in the region, people wonder, can the US do both? Is there enough bandwidth? Is there enough oxygen in Washington to be able to pursue the Indo-Pacific strategy while the historic pull to Europe and the kind of scale of challenge in Europe, I think presents huge problems. So therefore, I would ask all the three speakers to reflect on it. Then I have one question each for the speakers. First one to Afreen. Afreen, there is a lot of criticism of the US Indo-Pacific strategy that it doesn't have enough of economics, and that the US government has talked about in the last few months about an Indo-Pacific economic framework. There is IPS, there is IPEF, that is the economic framework. Could you tell us a little bit, when is it likely to come? What is it planned to do? So therefore, I think that will be useful input to our discussion. Second, to Coordinator Steele, another criticism of the Indo-Pacific strategy is that, look, there's too much of the military stuff, big strategy, maritime, etc., but not enough. We don't hear enough of what the US is doing in relation to the developmental needs. We saw Ambassador Chung talk about some of it. Could you just tell us, you have Samantha Power as the director, so what is the vision for South Asia for the USA? Because for ordinary people, what matters is not the grand strategy between US and China, but their own lives. So how does the USA deal with that in the Indo-Pacific? To the Admiral, here again, I think there's much talk about the Quad, there is AUKUS, there is the US-China dialogue, these kind of big boys playing big games. But we're sitting in Sri Lanka, but there is a lot of concern among the smaller states. So is it really only about big coalitions, or how does the US address the security concerns? And how is it going to deal with the concerns and aspirations of the smaller countries, especially island countries like Sri Lanka, which have unique special concerns? So therefore, these are my basic questions. Shall we start with Afreen?
Absolutely. Thank you, Raja Mohan, for those questions. With regard to your first question about whether the US can truly focus on the Indo-Pacific while the crisis is unfolding in Ukraine, I think the answer is absolutely yes. The Secretary of State, Anthony Blinken, has a saying, we need to be able to walk and chew gum at the same time. And he reflects that message in almost every senior staff engagement he has at the State Department. And by that, he means that we cannot let the crisis du jour prevent us from focusing on the longer term strategic issues, which, as everybody here has mentioned, is the Indo-Pacific. And that's not just words, that's also action. You saw the Secretary of State come to Australia for the Quad Foreign Ministerial in February, which was around the time when things were blowing up in Ukraine. Undersecretary Nuland was recently in Sri Lanka and in the region writ large, showing our commitment to this region. So yes, absolutely. While certainly a lot of attention is rightfully focused on Russia and Ukraine, we are very committed to advancing our broader goals in the Indo-Pacific region. On the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework, it's a great question. We are developing in concert with partners and allies in the region a comprehensive framework that's going to address 4 different sets of issues. That includes supply chain resiliency, climate change is a big focus, fair trade, digital economies is another focus, and then finally tax and anti-corruption. Those pillars, as we're calling them, are all very much still being worked. They're still under development, but there's a lot of great thought that's going into it. And I anticipate that, in the coming month or so, we'll have something more comprehensive to announce and reveal. But it's an ongoing process. We are very much soliciting the input of our partners and allies in the region. We have spoken with the Sri Lankans about it as well. And so, it will be ongoing with a hope for an announcement in the coming month or so.
Thank you, Raja. Two great questions. Let me start with the latter first, and I'll go from macro to micro. So indeed, Administrative Power has outlined her vision for USAID's inclusive global development. And this is a bold vision for USAID and for the entire international development community. And its focus is to put accessibility and equity at the center. And it's this notion that inclusive development is the concept that every person, regardless of their identity, is instrumental in transforming their own societies. It's investing in the individual as much as it is the institution. And so, the IPS recognizes this power of inclusivity and all that we do. And look, these are no small order tasks here: sustaining development gains, spurring progress, economic growth. I would argue, though, that this inclusivity that Administrative Power has set forth is what keeps fueling the Indo-Pacific successes already. When we think about the next 10 years ahead of us, and beyond the crisis du jour, in which we rebuild from the pandemic and address climate change in meaningful ways, we see that this future of inclusivity simply must be sustained and strengthened. But so that's sort of just to set the stage. To go on more of a micro level, all of our programming in South Asia, we mainstream inclusivity and gender equity and equality into everything we do. And so combating stigma and discrimination, promoting empowerment, inclusion of marginalized or underrepresented groups. These are all sort of important aspects of what we do. Our specific priorities include regional issues in energy, health, trade, donor coordination, digital connectivity, COVID-19 assistance, and of course, which we'll talk about today, is disaster resilient infrastructure. And all of this lines up really well with the IPS pillars, right? So free and open, connected, prosperous, secure, resilient. And as the systems that serve everyone's foundational health and education needs become stronger and more reliable, entire countries grow into these more prosperous, grow more prosperous, and all citizens can enjoy their rights. And so to go one more micro aspect closer, the nano approach. Just a year ago, in January of 2021, we launched India's first comprehensive clinic for the transgender community. Provides a full range of health services and dignified care for the transgender community in a stigma-free environment. This was previously unavailable. Now, the clinics are run by skilled health care providers, ensuring that patients receive quality care and support in a trusted environment. This is an inclusive, trusted environment. Just this past July, we supported 2 more health clinics, also in India, to promote more inclusive health services for the transgender community outside of India. Look, progress like this and in other interconnected sectors across South Asia, we're hoping to shape a freer and more open region and contribute to a more prosperous and peaceful world for all. But your other question, Ukraine, I will amplify what Afreen shared as well. It is possible to walk and chew gum at the same time. And indeed, I'll quote my colleague, Mira Rapp-Hooper, who's the NSC Director for Indo-Pacific Strategy. And Mira and I had a chat about 2 weeks ago, and Mira said, we can be in 2 theaters at once. And indeed, there's no difference there. So I look forward to supporting the long-term development goals of the Indo-Pacific. That's certainly beyond the crisis du jour.
Admiral, your turn, yeah.
Yes, thank you, Raja. Let me start with the Ukraine question that you tee up. I agree with both Afreen and Chris about their approach in what the United States looks at. I mean, we don't get pulled into just one area of interest or conflict. And in fact, it's an American way, right? But I'm equating it to like kids soccer, right? So the U.S. doesn't play kids soccer. Everybody runs to the one ball and try to kick it. Everybody has the importance and priorities and understanding the global connections that we have and responsibilities, by the way. So I would, let me put this in context. You know, both Admiral Aquilino, who is the commander of the Indo-Pacific here as a geographic combatant commander Indo-Pacific, most of you know him. And also his predecessor, Admiral Davison, has been going to Congress and addressing it through hearings about the importance of readiness in the Indo-Pacific. And we talked about opportunities and where we're at, but we're also talking about potential vulnerabilities. And so I want to say this in front of everybody, that Ukraine is an example of an instability that just can happen overnight. And it is the readiness of forces, and not just the US, but collectively, that matters if these things happen. Because some would argue, and I was reading an article that says, oh, if we did all this with Putin and we did all this and that with economic sanctions, he wouldn't have invaded Ukraine. Well, we don't know that. That's just people speculating. So the resilience piece is the collective piece to be always ready. So Ukraine should be a reminder to all of what kind of flashpoints, if you think about even South Asia, sir, think about where potential flashpoints are the forces ready? And the integrated deterrence that I refer to is very important when you look at what Sri Lanka and other countries can do to contribute to security. The other thing that I would address is the point you make about AUKUS Quad and all the bigger countries having the discussions here about what they want to do, where they want to go, and the concern by smaller states, are they being heard? And from the DCAT APCS, and by the way, Raja, thank you for giving a shout out to APCSS, but it is especially those countries that perhaps don't have the capacity and capability, that play a critical role in certain regions, that have in sea lines of communication, or even the prosperity and stability of a certain region in the Indo-Pacific. All countries, big or small, for the United States matter. But here's the rub, right? Like, for example, in Oceania, so I'm going global here in terms of, or going Indo-Pacific real large. Only 3 of those island nations have a Navy. How do you like those bag of beans, right? And so when they come to the United States, they're not asking for a destroyer or a carrier. They're asking for, like, hey, can you help us in the EEZ management? Hey, can you help us when we have a typhoon and we don't have the capacity and capabilities? So it's really about listening to what these countries need. And when it comes to South Asia, since my time here as being director for over 4 years, prior to COVID, I have tried to literally go to South Asia and visit the countries like Sri Lanka so I can listen. I can listen as to some of the issues that are important to you. And that's when you leverage, when I talk about integrated deterrence, please don't just stop with that ships and planes and tanks. Please go across the whole of government capacity and capability of US and other nations that can provide that support. When you say from Sri Lanka, these are my concerns in climate change, my concerns on economics, my concern in cybersecurity. It's across the board, sir. The United States and like-minded nations are willing to help. But I think I'm going to end it by this. I mentioned to you about the what has not changed and that key theme about working with allies and partners. But I also said it's a consultative process. And what is key is to continue to communicate. Even despite COVID, we must bring partners together, especially the ones, and I have to underline this, especially partners that we don't always agree with, but we have common areas that we must talk and collaborate with. And so with that, I hope I answered that question. It was a tough question, by the way, and the allotted time that we have, but we look forward for more questions. Thank you.
I already saw 2 hands. Maybe there's a third question. I'm going to take it. So Dr. Pramod Jaiswal. So make it sharp. I see a lot of hands, so we can take them all. Or why don't you?
Yeah. Oh. Mm-hmm. Okay. Hello. Hi. I I have a question for Mr. Steele from the USAID. My name is Sivali. I'm a Sri Lankan American student studying abroad, and I'm based in Kandy. I have a tremendous amount of respect for the USAID and their work. Sorry, here. Because my grandfather has been involved with the USAID since the 90s. And one trend that I was just wondering if we have awareness in at the USAID is, especially in targeting female-owned businesses, I think that there is a definitely advantage that people who live in more metropolitan areas have in getting involved in some of these projects that the USAID is supporting, including the Accelerate Her and Wake initiatives that are partnering with the USAID. And being from Kandy, I just wonder whether there is a strategy in place by the USAID to cultivate that kind of organization in regions like the central and northern province that typically get less exposure to those kinds of wonderful initiatives.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So I'm going to take two more questions. Then can you, to the front, please. Can you bring it? No, listen, yes. I have seen these hands. If you can bring those microphone here.
Can I go with the next question?
I'll come to you, but let's first have Dr. Jaiswal. Pramod, if you can keep it brief.
I'll be very brief. How is Indo-Pacific strategy going to deal with the concern challenging the Himalayan countries, especially that borders with China, like Bhutan, Nepal, or Myanmar? At the time where Chinese are not comfortable of Indo-Pacific and are really challenging India probably in the Himalayas, because India has a strategic states in Himalayas. So my question is, how can Indo-Pacific strategy meet the challenges of Himalayan states as they are already started feeling the heat of Indo-Pacific? And briefly on, I just want to add what Professor Rajamohan said, that what are the Indo-Pacific economic component of Indo-Pacific? The reason I'm raising is that you saw in Nepal, initially the Chinese had no problem with MCC, but the moment David Range made a statement that MCC is a part of Indo-Pacific strategy, Chinese were not comfortable, and there were lots of problems with Indo-Pacific later, which finally got passed. Thank you.
Point is made, yeah. So please introduce yourself.
I'm Professor Gamini Kirivella, Executive Director, presently the Regional Center for Strategic Studies. My question relates to the China factor in the broader concept of Indo-Pacific. Countries like Sri Lanka compelled to deal with China alone with Indo-Pacific concept. One of the key factors in US policy was throughout vacillating from one to one. They didn't have clear policy during the Cold War period. Now they have presented clearly the Indo-Pacific strategy. Then most important factor is how to deal with China. Then that factor is very important as far as small states are concerned, because they had to deal with China as an emerging power. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we had three good questions here. One on the USAID priorities, one on the Himalayan countries, and one on the China question. So to three speakers, if you can be brief, then we can take another round of questions.
Madam, I'm sorry, I didn't catch your name. Small delay, but thank you for your question, an important one. And it's always great to hear about the longevity of our investments with your grandfather being a part of USAID programs many years ago. I mentioned at the top of my talk about inclusive development, right? And so this the idea that we invest in the individual as much as we do the institution. And so as we are examining how we do outreach to more rural areas, perhaps in northern Sri Lanka and other places, we are looking for an effort called localization. And in fact, if you get a chance, you can Google that, and you'll see some of our work as an agency to increase access to USAID programs for more rural, more distant communities, not just geographically, but those who are furthest from opportunity, right? And so the localization efforts are part of what we're doing with the Indo-Pacific strategy. As we develop our framework, our USAID framework for Indo-Pacific work, We'll soon release that likely at the end of April. And there's a large component on localization, which is how do we get beyond where we've been before and how do we move the needle even closer? So happy to take any further questions on that. You can follow up with me over email and I can get back to you.
Thank you.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, with respect to the Himalayan states, that is obviously a key focus of the Indo-Pacific strategy and our ongoing work in the region. The State Department provides a significant amount of security assistance to the Indo-Pacific region, including through the Bengal Initiative, which has devoted some security assistance to Nepal, which is border security, counter-narcotics, all forms of security assistance. So the Himalayan states are very much a focus of the Indo-Pacific strategy. They are a focus of our efforts to date, and we will grow in our resourcing and attention to that region moving forward.
Admiral?
Yes, really quickly, on the question on the China factor. First, let me clarify something. When I raised the issue on authoritarian states and when I mentioned PRC directly, I was referring to the Chinese Communist Party, the CCP. Not talking about the Chinese people. The Chinese people are awesome people. There's a lot of businesses that are happening worldwide and stuff with Chinese. I'm just saying the way the authoritarian government have chosen under the leadership of Xi Jinping to usurp a lot of these principles and values. Sir, your question has been asked by many, many countries, and I've heard it so many times. And here is my basic response to it. You know, they're going to give you options. CCP is going to give you options depending on what your needs are. And when I think about they are the antithesis of the values and principles of free and open, what is at stake in terms of Sri Lanka's sovereignty, your good governance, respect, transparency, and free trade? You just have to read what other options are out there other than China. I mean, the fact that the United States is coming out and having more conversations and having these engagements in that cause is not because of China. It's because of what the CCP has done through the decades when we first started to try to cooperate with China to bring them into the 21st century so that we can all benefit prosperously. But then the conditions changed, and we recognize that through different administrations, hence the rebalance of the Pacific. So what I would offer you, sir, and it's not just the US definitely in capacity and capability, but there are like-minded nations too that can offer perhaps support in what the needs are for the respective countries. Japan steps up to the plate. EU, as a regional institution, has stepped up to the plate. And as you know, in Europe, EU has the big purse strings there. They have Indo-Pacific strategies like France, UK, Germany, etc., because of the importance of maintaining the rules-based order. So options, sir. There are many more options that are starting to come into the discussions as a result of what countries themselves are coming to the conclusion about China, the CCP. Thank you.
Okay, gentlemen at the back, if you can speak only for 1 minute, please do. Then we'll have to wrap it up because we're really running behind. Can you just
My name is Madhushan Sanivratna, research analyst of the Institute of National Security Studies. Very good morning, the audience and the panelists, those who joined us virtually. So in the session, I've identified the three main perceptions, IPS, Indian...
Just one thought. We are really running out of time.
Okay. So this is for Dr. Afreen Akhtar. So my question is, in the US relations to Indo-Pacific area being two major concerns, two major facets. The one is the ties with the major states. The other one is the ties with the smaller states. So it seems that the ties with the smaller states in more unilateral when it comes to geopolitics. So Dr. Afreen, could you elaborate more that what are the shared benefits that the unilateral states as we gained from the United States?
Thank you. Afreen, we're really running. Come on. I think the last word, please.
I will just say that while certainly the United States has focused on, has developed strong partnerships with major allies and major partners such as India, the Indo-Pacific strategy is extremely focused on developing those partnerships with smaller states such as Sri Lanka, such as some of the Pacific Island states. A lot of that is actually enumerated very clearly in the Indo-Pacific strategy as well. And as we look to build out resources for this region, in our engagements with Congress and our appropriations moving forward, we are really focusing in on how we can augment those partnerships with the smaller states. So one is not necessarily prioritized over the other. Thank you.
Thank you, Shireen, and thank you all the speakers. I want to apologize for a lot of other hands that had gone up to ask various questions, but today we have the whole of the day, another 2 long sessions, so I'm sure all those ideas which people have, we can debate them. But I want to bring this session to a close by thanking the 3 panelists. Thank you for giving us the perspectives from the administration, because for us it's important to listen to your voices as we make up our own minds. I also want to thank Ambassador Chung and General Perez for starting us off this morning. So I'll close here by thanking all of you, and to any administrative announcements to make after this, please do, and then we'll take it from here.
Thank you very much, Professor Rajamohan, for moderating that particular session. Obviously, there's more to come. Right now, we have what is customarily referred to in certain quarters of the globe as a coffee break. But that doesn't apply here. This is a place for Ceylon tea, so it's a tea break here. And you're welcome to partake of refreshment that has been made ready. It's a short break. But before we move there, we'd like to have Her Excellency, the Ambassador, and some, especially the speakers, line up here on stage for a group photograph. Those that have no reason to find entertainment or amusement from other people posing for a photograph, you can go right ahead and partake of refreshment.